The stars looked peaceful from the observation deck of Frontier Station Sejong. Commander Daeho stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the slow rotation of the moon below. The station had been his home for 3 years now, and he had grown to love the quiet rhythm of life on the frontier. Behind him, the sounds of the station hummed softly. People laughed in the dining hall. Children played in the residential section. Scientists debated theories in the research labs. It was a good life out here, far from Earth's crowded cities and political games. 967 people called this station home. Some were military like him, but most were civilians. Miners who pulled rare minerals from the moon's surface. Scientists who studied the strange properties of the local asteroid field. Families who had come seeking a fresh start among the stars. Daeho knew many of them by name. He made it his business to walk through every section of the station at least once a week, talking to people, listening to their concerns. Dr. Hyejin was in her lab when he passed by during his morning rounds. She was bent over a microscope, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Hyejin was the station's chief xenobiologist, though there wasn't much alien life to study out here. Mostly she cataloged microbes from ice samples and dreamed of the day when humanity would make peaceful contact with intelligent alien species. Still looking for little green men in those ice cores? Daeho asked with a smile. Hyejin looked up and laughed. You know they won't be green, Commander. And when we do meet other intelligent life, I hope we'll be ready to talk instead of fight. That's why we have people like you, Daeho said, to remind us that not everything needs to be solved with weapons. He moved on to the security station, where Lieutenant Bora was reviewing the defensive systems. Bora was young for her position, only 28, but she took her job seriously. Too seriously sometimes. She worried about threats that Daeho thought were unlikely this far from any hostile territory. Commander, I've been going over the sensor logs, Bora said without looking up from her screen. We're picking up more traffic in the outer system than usual. Could be nothing, but I don't like it. Pirates? Daeho asked. No, the signatures are too big. These are warships. I think they might be Vrellan. Daeho felt a small knot form in his stomach. The Vrellans were a warrior species that humanity had encountered 2 years ago. The first meetings had been tense but peaceful. The Vrellans believed in honor and strength, and they seemed to respect that humans were willing to defend their territory. But lately, the diplomatic reports from Earth suggested the relationship was cooling. The Vrellans thought humans were expanding too quickly into space they considered theirs. How many ships? Daeho asked. Hard to say at this range. At least 20, maybe more. They're just passing through the outer system, haven't made any moves toward us. Keep monitoring. If they change course, I want to know immediately. Daeho continued his rounds, trying not to let Bora's concern infect his mood. In the communications center, he found Minho hunched over his console, adjusting the station's long-range transmitters. Minho was a good man, dedicated and hardworking. He had pictures of his wife and daughter taped to his workstation. The girl was 7 years old with a bright smile that reminded Minho why he spent years away from Earth earning colonial pay. Everything running smoothly? Daeho asked. Yes, sir. Just finished the monthly maintenance on the emergency beacon. It'll punch through any interference if we ever need it. Minho tapped the console. Not that we will. This is the safest posting in the frontier. Daeho wanted to believe that. He had requested this command specifically because it was supposed to be quiet. After 20 years of military service, including 2 hot conflicts with separatist colonies, he had earned some peace. But the universe had a way of disrupting even the best-laid plans. That evening, Daeho sent his weekly report to Earth Command. He mentioned the Vrellan ships in the outer system, but classified it as routine traffic. He also renewed his standing request for additional defensive capabilities. The station's weapons were enough to handle pirates or small raiders, but against a real military force, they would barely make a dent. Earth Command responded with the same message they always sent. Resources were stretched thin, and Sejong Station was low priority. The nearest fleet that could respond to an emergency was 3 weeks away at maximum speed. 3 weeks. Daeho stared at that number for a long time. Over the next 2 days, the Vrellan ships remained in the outer system. They didn't approach, but they didn't leave either. Bora's security team tracked them constantly, trying to determine their intentions. On the 3rd day, the Vrellans sent a message. It was brief and cold. They claimed the Kepler 442 system fell within their historical territory. They demanded that Frontier Station Sejong be evacuated within 10 days, or they would remove it by force. Daeho immediately contacted Earth Command. The response took 6 hours to arrive because of the distance. When it came, it was not what he wanted to hear. Earth's diplomats were attempting to negotiate with the Vrellan Empire. Sejong Station was to remain operational and maintain its position. Evacuating would be seen as weakness and might encourage more Vrellan aggression. The fleet was being repositioned, but it would still take 3 weeks to arrive. "Hold your ground," the message said. "Show them that humanity does not abandon its people." Daeho called a meeting with his senior staff. He laid out the situation honestly. They were being used as a political statement, a symbol of human determination. If the Vrellans attacked, they would have to defend themselves with what they had. Dr. Hyojin looked stricken. "Surely they won't actually attack. We're a research station. Most of our people are civilians." "The Vrellans see things differently," Bora said quietly. "To them, we're all representatives of humanity. They don't distinguish between military and civilian targets the way we do." "Can we evacuate anyway?" Minho asked. "Get people out on the transport ships?" Daeho shook his head. "Our transports are too slow. The Vrellan ships would intercept them before they reached the jump point. And if we start evacuating, it might trigger an immediate attack. Right now, we still have time. Time for Earth's diplomats to work, time for the fleet to get closer. But time was the one thing they didn't have." On the 5th day, the Vrellan fleet changed course. Long-range sensors showed 27 warships accelerating toward the station. Bora put the security team on full alert and powered up every defensive weapon they had. Daeho ordered non-essential personnel to the intersections of the station and sealed the outer bulkheads. He sent an emergency transmission to Earth Command, knowing they wouldn't receive it for 6 hours and couldn't respond for 6 more. The Vrellan fleet would arrive in 18 hours. Daeho stood on the command deck and watched the red icons creep closer on the tactical display. Around him, people worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for a fight they all knew they couldn't win. He thought about the 967 souls under his protection. He thought about Hyojin's dreams of peaceful contact. He thought about Minho's daughter, waiting for her father to come home, and he hoped that Earth would remember them. The Vrellan fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, exactly when Bora's calculations predicted. 27 warships appeared on the sensors like angry red wounds against the black of space. They were massive vessels, each one 3 times the size of Sejong Station's largest defensive platform. Their hulls were decorated with battle honors and clan markings, proud symbols of a warrior culture that had conquered dozens of worlds. Commander Daeho stood in the command center, surrounded by his staff. The tension was so thick he could taste it. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Outside the reinforced windows, he could see the distant points of light that were the Vrellan ships. They looked so small from here, harmless, but the sensors told a different story. Each of those ships carried enough firepower to level a city. "Open a channel," Daeho said. His voice was calm, steady. He had learned long ago that a commander's composure was the anchor that kept everyone else from panicking. "All frequencies. I want them to hear this." Minho worked his console, his hand shaking slightly. "Channel open, sir." Daeho took a breath. "This is Commander Daeho of Frontier Station Sejong, representing the Terran Union. We are a peaceful research and mining facility. We have civilian personnel aboard, including families and children. We mean you no harm. If you have grievances with our presence here, we are willing to negotiate. Please respond." The silence stretched out. Seconds became minutes. The Vrellan fleet continued its approach, maintaining perfect formation. On the tactical display, Bora tracked their weapon systems. Every gun port was open. Every missile tube was hot. "Sir, they're not responding," Minho said. "They're not even acknowledging our transmission." "Try again." "Every language we have on file. Make sure they understand we're not a military threat." Minho sent the message again in 3 different Vrellan dialects and 2 trade languages used across known space. Still nothing. The fleet came closer. Warning alarms began to sound as they crossed into the station's defensive perimeter. Lieutenant Bora looked at Daeho, her young face pale but determined. "Commander, they're locking weapons. If we're going to fight, it has to be now." Daeho wanted to give the order. Every instinct told him to hit them first, to make them pay for every meter of space they took. But he also knew that opening fire would doom any chance of survival they had left. He gripped the edge of the command console and watched the tactical display. The first Vrellan ship fired without warning. A bright lance of energy crossed the distance in less than a second. It struck Defensive Platform 2, one of the automated weapon satellites that orbited the station. The platform exploded in a shower of debris and flame that was quickly swallowed by the vacuum of space. Alarm screamed throughout the station. The crew stared in horror at the screens. "Return fire!" Deho shouted. "All weapons, target the lead ships." Bora's fingers flew across her console. The station's railguns opened up, sending streams of magnetically accelerated projectiles toward the Vrellan fleet. Missile batteries launched their payloads. Laser arrays focused their beams on the approaching warships. For a moment, Deho felt a surge of hope as he saw their weapons impacting enemy shields. Then the Vrellans returned fire in earnest. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a bucket. The Vrellan warships had shields that absorbed the station's weapons fire with barely a flicker. Their return fire was devastating. Within 5 minutes, all 4 defensive platforms were destroyed. The station's external weapons were targeted and eliminated one by one. Railgun turrets exploded. Missile batteries were vaporized. The outer hull began to breach in dozens of places. "Seal all sections," Deho ordered. "Emergency bulkheads. Get everyone to the core!" But it was too late for many. The mining section took a direct hit that cracked the hull like an eggshell. 32 miners died instantly as the atmosphere vented into space. The residential quarters in Section 7 lost pressure when a Vrellan missile penetrated deep into the station before exploding. Families who had been hiding in their homes simply disappeared. In her lab, Dr. Hyejin tried to evacuate her research team. They were running through the corridors when the Vrellans breached the hull above them. The explosive decompression sucked 2 of her assistants out into space before the emergency doors could seal. Hyejin grabbed onto a railing, her feet lifting off the floor as the air roared past her. She held on with all her strength, her fingers going numb. Then the doors slammed shut and she fell to the floor, gasping. But there was no time to recover. She could hear the sounds of boarding pods attaching to the outer hull. The Vrellans weren't content with destroying the station from a distance. They wanted to come aboard and finish the job personally. The first Vrellan warriors cut through the hull in the station's main corridor. They were massive creatures nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick armor that made them look like walking tanks. They carried weapons that were as much melee weapons as guns, designed for close combat where honor could be proven face to face. They moved through the station with brutal efficiency, killing anyone they encountered. Bora led a small security team to try and stop them. Her people set up a defensive position at a corridor junction, using supply crates as cover. When the Vrellans came around the corner, the security team opened fire with everything they had. Bora saw her shots hitting the enemy armor, saw sparks flying, but the Vrellans just kept coming. They were too strong, too heavily armored. One by one her team fell. Bora fought to the end, emptying her rifle into a charging Vrellan warrior before his blade cut her down. In the communications center, Minho frantically worked his console. The main transmitters were destroyed, but the emergency beacon was still intact. It was a small device, designed to survive almost anything and broadcast a distress signal that could punch through jamming and interference. His hands shook as he uploaded everything. Sensor logs, tactical data, video feeds from throughout the station. He wanted Earth to see what happened here. He wanted them to know. The door behind him exploded inward. A Vrellan warrior stepped through the smoke, its weapon raised. Minho hit the final button, activating the beacon, and then everything went white. Dr. Hyejin made it to the command center, along with 17 other survivors. Commander Deho was there, still trying to coordinate a defense that no longer existed. The command center was the most heavily armored part of the station, designed to withstand direct hits. "It was their last refuge, Commander. What do we do?" Hyejin asked. She was covered in dust and blood, though she didn't know if it was hers or someone else's. Deho looked at the tactical display. The station was dying. Life support was failing in most sections. The Vrellans controlled everything except this small pocket. He had no weapons left, no way to fight back. He looked at the people around him. Scared faces looking to him for answers he didn't have. "We upload everything," he said quietly. "Every piece of data we have. Fleet composition, weapons capabilities, tactics. We send it all to the beacon so Earth will know what they're facing." He sat down at a console and began transferring files. Around him, others did the same. They worked in silence, knowing these were their final moments. The heavy footsteps of Vrellan warriors echoed in the corridors outside. They were coming. Deho finished the upload and stood. He drew his sidearm, knowing it would do nothing against Vrellan armor but unable to face the end unarmed. The others did the same. They formed a small circle, backs together, facing the doors. The doors exploded inward. The Vrellans came through like a wave of death. Deho fired until his weapon clicked empty. Then he charged, trying to buy a few more seconds for his people. He felt the impact of a Vrellan weapon, and then he felt nothing at all. Dr. Hia-Jin was the last one to die. She stood over Deho's body and thought about all her dreams of peaceful contact between species. She thought about understanding and cooperation among the stars. As the Vrellan warrior raised its weapon, her last thought was a prayer that someone, somewhere, would make those dreams real. The command center fell silent. Throughout the station, the last pockets of resistance were eliminated. In less than 3 hours, all 967 people aboard Frontier Station Sejong were dead. The Vrellans moved through the wreckage, ensuring there were no survivors. They planted their battle standards in the command center and claimed the system for their empire. Warlord Thane, commander of the Vrellan fleet, stood in what remained of the observation deck. Below him, the moon continued its slow rotation, uncaring about the massacre that had occurred in orbit. Thane recorded a message and transmitted it toward human space. "This is Warlord Thane of the Vrellan Empire. The system you call Kepler 442 now belongs to us. Your station has been destroyed. Your people are dead. This is what happens when weak races try to claim what belongs to the strong. Withdraw from the frontier, or more of your colonies will share this fate. You have been warned." He cut the transmission and ordered his fleet to begin establishing a military base on the station's ruins. It would serve as a forward operating post for future expansions into human territory. The Vrellans celebrated their victory, confident that humanity would see sense and retreat. They did not know that far away in space, a small emergency beacon was broadcasting everything that had happened. They did not know that every detail of the massacre, every tactical decision, every act of violence was being recorded and transmitted across the light years to Earth. They did not know what they had awakened. The emergency beacon's transmission reached Earth 3 days after the massacre. It arrived in the middle of the night, Geneva time. But within minutes, every senior official in the Terran Union government was awake and moving. The data was uploaded to secure servers and distributed to key personnel. By dawn, the entire government knew what had happened at Frontier Station Sejong. Fleet Admiral Jisoo was in her office at Terran Command when the briefing began. She was a woman who had spent 40 years in the military, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space. She had fought pirates, separatists, and hostile alien raiders. She had seen death and dealt it in return. But as she watched the footage from Sejong Station, she felt something cold settle in her chest. The recording showed everything. The Vrellan fleet's arrival, Commander Deho's attempts to negotiate, the one-sided battle that destroyed the station's defenses in minutes, and then the boarding, the systematic slaughter of everyone aboard. The footage showed civilians being gunned down in corridors.
Children dying in their parents' arms.
Scientists executed in their labs. The security teams fighting to the last person. Jisoo watched it all without expression. When the recording ended with Warlord Thane's arrogant message, she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes for just a moment. Then she opened them and began making calls. General Taejin arrived at Terran Command an hour later. He was head of Strategic Command, responsible for planning humanity's military operations across all colonized space. He was a tall man with gray hair and a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when the situation required it. He sat across from Jisoo and pulled up the tactical data on his tablet. 967 dead, he said quietly, including 214 children. "I know," Jisoo replied. "The Vrellans are claiming the entire Kepler 442 system now. They're building a military base on the station's wreckage. Their message is clear. They think we'll back down." "Will we?" Taejin looked at her with hard eyes. "That's not our decision to make, but I can tell you what our options are." He pulled up a map of known space on the wall display. The Vrellan Empire was marked in red, a sprawling collection of 40 star systems spread across a significant portion of the frontier. Their territory bordered human space in a dozen places. They had a fleet of thousands of warships and a warrior culture that glorified military conquest. "Option 1, Taejin said. We withdraw from the frontier, pull back our colonies, give up the territory the Vrellans want. We avoid a war we might not be able to win. Next option, Jisoo said flatly. Option 2. Limited military response. We send a fleet to retake the Kepler 442 system. We make it clear that we won't allow them to just take what's ours. But we limit the scope of the conflict, try to achieve a negotiated settlement. That didn't work so well for Commander Daeho. No, it didn't. Taejin touched his tablet and the display changed. New icons appeared, scattered throughout the solar system. Ships. Hundreds of them. Which brings us to option 3. Jisoo leaned forward, studying the display. The Ghost Fleet. The Ghost Fleet, Taejin confirmed. 50 dreadnoughts, 200 cruisers, 500 support vessels. All built in secret over the last 15 years in hidden shipyards throughout Sol system. Armed with weapons that most of the galaxy doesn't know exist. It was meant to be our final deterrent, the ace up our sleeve if we ever faced an existential threat. The Vrellans aren't an existential threat, Jisoo said. They're powerful, but they can't threaten Earth itself. No. But they murdered almost 1,000 of our people to make a point. They did it knowing those people were helpless. They broadcast it like they were proud of it. Taejun's voice was cold. If we don't respond with overwhelming force, every hostile species in the galaxy will think they can do the same thing. We'll be seen as weak. Our colonies will be targets. Jisoo stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of Geneva stretching toward the horizon. Somewhere down there, families were waking up to the news that their loved ones were dead. Mino's wife and daughter, the parents of those 214 children. They would want justice. They would want someone to pay. What would option 3 look like? She asked. Taejun pulled up another display. This one showed the Vrellan homeworld, Vrelis Prime. Total strategic retaliation. We take the Ghost Fleet to Vrelis Prime. We destroy their military capability. We eliminate their ability to threaten human space. You're talking about attacking their homeworld. I'm talking about making sure they never attack us again. The casualties would be massive. Billions of Vrellans live on that planet. 967 humans lived on Sejong Station. They stared at each other across the office. Jisoo had known Taejun for 20 years. She knew he wasn't a monster. But she also knew he understood the mathematics of warfare. Sometimes you had to do terrible things to prevent even worse things from happening. This goes to the president, Jisoo said, and the council. We don't make this decision. No. But they'll want our recommendation. An hour later, they sat in the emergency session of the Terran Council. President Yoonji presided over the meeting, her face drawn with grief and lack of sleep. Around the table sat representatives from every major colony and military command. The debate was fierce. Some counselors argued for diplomacy. They said attacking the Vrellan homeworld would make humanity look like the aggressors. It would turn other alien species against them. It might trigger a wider war that could consume the entire frontier. Others argued for a measured military response. Retake the Kepler 442 system, destroy the Vrellan base, show strength but leave room for negotiation. Don't escalate beyond what was necessary. But Admiral Jisoo spoke last, and her words carried weight. I've watched the footage from Sejong Station 7 times now, she said. I've seen how our people died. I've read Commander Daeho's last reports. He asked for reinforcements. He asked for better defenses. He asked for the resources to protect his people. We told him no. We told him to hold his ground because we needed to make a political statement. She paused, looking around the table at the politicians and generals. 967 people trusted us to protect them. We failed. They died because we were too cautious, too worried about offending the Vrellans. And when they were slaughtered, the Vrellans celebrated it. They broadcast it as a victory. Admiral, we understand your anger, one of the counselors said. But anger isn't strategy. If we strike at their homeworld, we're no better than they are. No, Jisoo said coldly. We're better because we tried diplomacy first. We're better because we don't celebrate the murder of civilians. But we're also smart enough to know that some species only understand one language. The Vrellans respect strength. They view mercy as weakness. If we respond with anything less than overwhelming force, they'll see it as an invitation to attack again. General Tajin stood and activated the tactical display. The Ghost Fleet can be ready to deploy in 48 hours. We can strike at Vrelis Prime and cripple their military infrastructure before their main fleet can respond. We can end this threat permanently. At what cost? Another counselor demanded. You're talking about billions of deaths. They're talking about the lives of every human on the frontier, Tajin shot back. How many more Sejong stations are you willing to sacrifice to avoid looking like the bad guys? The debate raged for hours. Arguments were made and discarded. Plans were proposed and rejected. But in the end, it came down to President Yoonji. She sat at the head of the table listening to everything, her hands folded in front of her. Finally, she raised one hand and the room fell silent. I've been president for 6 years, she said quietly. In that time, I've made a lot of difficult decisions, but none of them compare to this. She looked at the tactical display, at the red marker indicating Vrelis Prime. The Vrelans wanted to show us the cost of standing in their way. They wanted us to be afraid. They wanted us to back down. She stood, and everyone in the room stood with her. They miscalculated, President Yoonji said. We'll show them the cost of touching what's ours. Admiral Jisoo, you will take command of the 1st Retribution Fleet. Your mission is to proceed to Vrelis Prime and eliminate the Vrelan Empire's military capability. Use whatever force is necessary, hold nothing back. Jisoo saluted. Understood, Madam President. And Admiral? I want them to know why this is happening. I want them to understand that actions have consequences. For every person who died at Sejong Station, I want the Vrelans to pay a price they'll never forget. 48 hours later, the Ghost Fleet departed from secret staging points throughout the solar system. 50 dreadnoughts, each one 5 kilometers long and bristling with weapons that had been developed specifically to fight a total war. 200 cruisers, fast and deadly. 500 support vessels carrying enough ammunition and supplies to prosecute a campaign that could last months if necessary. Admiral Jisoo stood on the bridge of the flagship, the TUS Reckoning. Round her. The crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for the jump to faster-than-light speeds. She looked at the tactical display one last time before they departed. Somewhere out in the darkness, the Vrelan Empire waited, confident in its power and certain of its superiority. All ships, she said into the fleet-wide channel. Set course for Vrelis Prime. Maximum speed. We have 967 reasons to make this quick. The fleet jumped and Sol system fell behind them. They were going to war, and they were going to make sure the galaxy remembered why you don't attack humanity. The human fleet arrived at Vrelis Prime exactly 18 days after the massacre at Sejong Station. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their ships spreading into attack formation with practiced precision. On the bridge of the TUS Reckoning, Admiral Jisoo watched the tactical display populate with enemy contacts. There were a lot of them. Fleet composition? She asked. Her tactical officer, Commander Young-ho, studied his screens. We're counting. 3,247 Vrelan warships. They're forming up between us and the planet. Looks like they're committing everything they have to the defense. Good, Jisoo said. That means we won't have to hunt them down later. The Vrelan homeworld filled the main view screen. It was a beautiful planet covered in blue oceans and green continents. Cities sparkled across the night side, millions of lights marking where billions of Vrelans lived their lives. Massive orbital stations ringed the planet, industrial complexes and defense platforms that had taken centuries to build. It all looked so peaceful from here. Jisoo thought about Sejong Station, about how peaceful it had looked before the Vrelans came. She felt no guilt about what was coming. Open a channel, she said. All frequencies. I want them to hear this before we begin. The communications officer nodded. Channel open, Admiral. Jisoo stood, her hands clasped behind her back. She spoke clearly, knowing her words would be recorded and replayed for years to come. This is Fleet Admiral Jisoo of the Terran Union, commanding the 1st Retribution Fleet. 18 days ago, Vrelan forces attacked Frontier Station Sejong without provocation or warning. 967 human beings were killed. Men, Women and children, civilians and military personnel alike. Your forces showed them no mercy. You broadcast their deaths as a triumph. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We are here to collect payment for those lives. You will surrender your fleet immediately and submit to Terran authority. You will stand down your orbital defenses and allow us to occupy your military installations. You have 1 hour to comply. If you refuse, we will take what we came for by force. This is your only warning. The response came quickly. On the view screen, a Vrellan appeared. He was massive even by Vrellan standards, covered in ceremonial armor decorated with the marks of countless battles. Warlord Thane, the commander who had led the attack on Sejong Station. Humans, Thane said, his voice dripping with contempt. You dare to threaten the homeworld of the Vrellan Empire? We destroyed your pathetic outpost with ease. We will destroy your fleet the same way. You should have stayed in your corner of space where you belong. Behind him, Jisoo could see other Vrellan commanders. They were laughing. They actually thought this was funny. They looked at humanity's fleet and saw nothing to fear. After all, they had 3,000 ships to humanity's 750. The numbers were on their side. They didn't understand what they were facing. Your hour starts now, Jisoo said, and cut the transmission. Exactly 60 minutes later, the Vrellan fleet attacked. They came in the traditional formation, ships arranged in honor-bound groups based on clan and battle history. It was the way they had fought for thousands of years, the way they had conquered dozens of worlds. They charged forward with weapons blazing, expecting the humans to meet them in glorious combat. Jisoo had other plans. All ships, she ordered. Implement battle plan Hammer. Long-range weapons free. Do not let them close to melee distance. The human fleet opened fire at maximum range. The Vrellans had never seen weapons like these. Matter disruption missiles that phased through shields and tore apart ship hulls at the molecular level. Nanite swarms that ate through armor plating like acid. Kinetic impactors that were launched from faster than light and hit with the force of small nuclear weapons. The front ranks of the Vrellan fleet simply disintegrated. Ships that had survived dozens of battles were reduced to expanding clouds of debris in seconds. The Vrellans tried to return fire, but they couldn't get close enough. Every time they advanced, the human weapons reached out and killed them at distances their own weapons couldn't match. Warlord Thane watched from his flagship as his fleet died. This wasn't battle. This wasn't honor. This was extermination. The humans weren't even trying to fight fairly. They stayed at maximum range and killed with cold efficiency, like farmers harvesting crops. All ships full advance. Thane roared. Close to combat range. Show these cowards what Vrellan warriors can do face to face. But the human fleet simply backed away, maintaining the distance. They moved in perfect coordination, every ship supporting the others. When Vrellan vessels tried to flank them, they found themselves caught in crossfires that shredded their hulls. When they tried to charge straight ahead, they flew into fields of mines that the human ships had been laying as they moved. Commander Young-ho tracked the battle on his displays. Admiral, the enemy is breaking formation. Some of their units are trying to retreat. Don't let them, Jisoo said. I want every ship that participated in the attack on Sejong accounted for. Check the tactical data we recovered from the station. Match it to the ship signatures in the Vrellan fleet. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of systematic, efficient destruction. The human fleet moved through the Vrellan formations like a scythe through wheat. Every ship that had been at Sejong Station was identified and targeted. Every vessel that had fired on the station, every ship that had launched boarding pods, every warship that had celebrated the massacre, was hunted down and destroyed. The Vrellan fleet tried to fight back. They tried everything they knew, but nothing worked. The humans had studied Vrellan tactics for 2 years, ever since first contact. They knew every strategy, every traditional formation, every honor-bound rule of engagement, and they exploited all of it. By the time the battle ended, only a few hundred Vrellan ships remained out of the original 3,000. They fled toward the outer system, abandoning their homeworld. Jisoo let them go. They would carry the message of what happened here to every corner of the Vrellan Empire. Status report, Jisoo ordered. We've lost 37 ships destroyed. Another 63 damaged but operational, Young-ho reported. Total casualties, 4,200 humans. All Vrellan ships that participated in the Sejong attack have been confirmed destroyed. 4,000 humans dead, to avenge 967. The mathematics of war were cruel, but Jisoo had known the price before she gave the order to attack. She looked at the planet below. The real work was about to begin. Locate Warlord Thane's flagship, she said. I want it disabled, not destroyed. Use precision fire. The human ships focused their weapons on Thane's massive command vessel. Carefully aimed shots took out its engines, its weapons, its shields. Within minutes, it was dead in space, unable to move or fight, but with its crew still alive inside. Send boarding teams, Jisoo ordered. I want Thane alive. He's going to witness what comes next. The boarding action was brief. The human Marines who entered Thane's ship were equipped with powered armor and weapons designed specifically for fighting Vrellans. They moved through the corridors, neutralizing resistance with ruthless efficiency. Within an hour, Warlord Thane was captured and transported to the Reckoning. They brought him to the observation deck. Thane was forced to his knees, his armor removed, his weapons taken. He glared at Admiral Jisoo with pure hatred. But there was something else in his eyes now. Fear. He was beginning to understand what he had unleashed. Do you know why you're still alive? Jisoo asked him. Thane said nothing. You're alive because I want you to see this. I want you to understand exactly what you brought down on your people. She gestured to the viewport where Vrellus Prime hung in space. That's your homeworld. 3 billion Vrellans live there. They have families. They have children. They have dreams and hopes for the future. She turned to look at him. Just like the people at Sejong Station did. You wouldn't dare, Thane said. His voice was hoarse. You're talking about genocide. No, I'm talking about consequences. Jisoo pulled up a holographic display. It showed the station intact and peaceful before the attack. 967 people. That's how many you killed. You did it to send a message. To show us that you were strong and we were weak. The hologram changed, showing the massacre, showing the civilians dying, showing the children. Now we're sending a message, Jisoo said. And we're going to make sure every species in the galaxy hears it clearly. She turned to her tactical officer. Commander Young-ho. Deploy the fleet in orbital bombardment positions. Target all military installations, industrial complexes, and defense platforms. Begin the siege of Vrellus Prime. Yes, Admiral. The human ships moved into position around the planet. Below them, sirens wailed across every city as the Vrellans realized what was coming. Their government broadcast surrender offers. Their religious leaders pleaded for mercy. Their civilians tried to evacuate. Jisoo opened a planet-wide channel. This is Admiral Jisoo. We are targeting military and industrial infrastructure only. Civilian casualties can be minimized if you comply with the following instructions. All civilians are to evacuate to the designated safe zones we are transmitting now. You have 2 hours. After that, we begin bombardment. On the planet below, chaos erupted. Millions of Vrellans tried to flee the cities, clogging the roads and airways. But the Vrellan government made a fatal mistake. The High Command refused to accept defeat. They ordered their civilians to stay in place to use themselves as shields. They believed the humans were bluffing, that no species would actually attack a populated planet. They were wrong. 2 hours passed. Jisoo watched the tactical display, seeing how many civilians had managed to evacuate. It wasn't enough. Millions still remained in the cities, either unable to leave or following their government's orders. She felt sick to her stomach, but she had given an order and she would see it through. All ships, she said quietly. Commence planetary pacification. Rules of engagement are in effect. Military and industrial targets only. But do not stop until the Vrellan Empire's ability to wage war is completely eliminated. The bombardment began, and Warlord Thane watched his world begin to burn. The first strikes hit the military installations. Orbital defense platforms exploded in brilliant flashes of light that could be seen from the surface. The massive weapons arrays that had protected Vrellus Prime for centuries were reduced to debris in minutes. Then the human fleet turned their attention to the planet itself. Admiral Jisoo stood on the observation deck of the Reckoning, watching the bombardment through the viewport. Beside her, Warlord Thane was forced to watch as well, held in place by 2 Marines in powered armor. She could hear him breathing heavily, could sense his rage and despair, but she felt no satisfaction in his suffering. This wasn't about revenge. It was about mathematics, cold, simple mathematics. The human ships fired in coordinated salvos. Plasma beams lanced down through the atmosphere, precisely targeted at military bases and weapons factories. The beams hit with such intensity that they turned sand to glass and metal to vapor. Entire installations simply ceased to exist. Manufacturing centers that had produced Vrellan warships for generations were erased in seconds. Status report, Jisoo said. Commander Young-ho worked his console tracking the bombardment. Primary military targets are being eliminated on schedule. We're picking up heavy civilian casualties in 3 major cities, where the Vrellan government ordered people to remain in place. What's the count? Estimated 2 million dead so far. Another 5 million wounded. The medical infrastructure is being overwhelmed. Jisoo closed her eyes briefly. 2 million. That was more than twice the population of Sejong Station. But the bombardment was just beginning. Continue operations. Maintain targeting priorities. Military first, then industrial, then infrastructure. The bombardment continued through the night. The human fleet worked with mechanical precision, destroying target after target. When the Vrellan military tried to launch fighters from hidden bases, they were shot down before they could reach orbit. When defense batteries came online, they were identified and eliminated within minutes. Every time the Vrellans tried to fight back, they were crushed with overwhelming force. On the surface, the cities burned. Not because the humans were targeting civilians, but because military bases and factories were located near population centers. When a munitions factory exploded, the blast wave destroyed everything within kilometers. When a starship production facility was hit, the burning wreckage fell onto residential districts. The Vrellans had built their civilization around their military might, and now that structure was collapsing on top of them. Warlord Thane finally spoke. His voice was broken, hollow. Why are you doing this? You've already won. Our fleet is destroyed. We can't fight back? Jisoo turned to look at him. You asked Commander Daeho the same question, didn't you? When he tried to surrender, when he begged you to spare the civilians. Do you remember what answer you gave him? Thane said nothing. You gave him no answer at all. You just killed him and everyone under his protection. 967 people who never threatened you, who only wanted to live in peace. Jisoo's voice was cold. You did that to send a message. To show humanity that you were strong and we were weak. To warn us away from space you claimed as yours. She gestured to the burning planet below. This is our message. This is what happens when you attack our people. When you kill our civilians. When you celebrate their deaths as victories. But our civilians had nothing to do with Sejong Station. Neither did ours. Jisoo walked to the viewport looking down at the planet. But you killed them anyway, and you would have done it again to the next station and the next until we either submitted or fought back. We chose to fight, and we chose to make sure you could never threaten us again. Hours turned into days. The bombardment continued without pause. The human fleet cycled through shifts, keeping fresh ships on station at all times. They destroyed every military base, every weapons factory, every shipyard. They collapsed the underground bunkers where the Vrellan government was hiding. They took out the communication networks that allowed the High Command to coordinate resistance. On the second day, the humans deployed atmospheric processors. These were devices designed for terraforming, machines that could alter the chemical composition of a planet's air. But instead of making the atmosphere more breathable, the processors were programmed to release compounds that were toxic to Vrellan biology. The effect was slow but inexorable. Within hours, Vrellans across the planet began experiencing respiratory distress. Within days, simply breathing the air would be fatal. Thane watched the processors deploying and understood what was happening. You're making our world uninhabitable. You're killing everyone. We're eliminating your ability to wage war, Jisoo corrected. The atmospheric changes can be reversed with the right technology, but it will take years, and it will require resources your empire no longer has. By the time you recover, you'll have learned your lesson. This is genocide. No, genocide is what you attempted at Sejong Station. This is a military operation with a clear strategic objective, but I understand the difference might seem academic when it's your people dying. On the third day, the planetary shield generators were targeted. These massive installations had protected Vrelis Prime from asteroid strikes and solar radiation for centuries. The human fleet overloaded them with concentrated fire, causing feedback loops in their power systems. When the generators failed, they exploded with the force of nuclear weapons. Entire city districts vanished in the blasts. The casualty count climbed. 10 million, 50 million, 100 million. The numbers became so large they lost meaning. They were just statistics now, data points on a tactical display. But Jisoo forced herself to remember that every number represented a life. A person who had existed, who had mattered to someone. Just like the people at Sejong Station. She thought about Minho, the communications specialist who had uploaded the emergency beacon. Did he know, in his final moments, that his actions would lead to this? Would he be proud or horrified by what humanity was doing in his name? There was no way to know. The dead didn't judge. Only the living had to carry that burden. On the fourth day, reports began arriving from the Vrellan colonies. Human strike forces had jumped into every system claimed by the Vrellan Empire. They weren't attacking civilians or planetary populations. They were surgically removing military capability. Shipyards were destroyed. Orbital fortresses were eliminated. Defense fleets were engaged and defeated. Within 72 hours, the Vrellan Empire's military infrastructure across 40 star systems simply ceased to exist. By the end of the fifth day, it was over. Vrellis Prime lay in ruins. The atmosphere was toxic. The cities were burning or collapsed. The military was destroyed. The government was dead, buried in the rubble of their bunker. 4,200,000,000 Vrellans were dead. The survivors huddled in whatever shelters they could find, waiting for aid that wouldn't come because there was no one left to organize it. Admiral Jisoo gave the final order. All ships cease fire. Begin recovery operations. I want medical supplies and atmospheric purifiers deployed to civilian population centers. We're done with the killing. Commander Young-ho looked at her in surprise. Admiral, we're providing aid? We're not monsters, Commander. We did what we came here to do. The Vrellan Empire is finished as a military threat. Now we show them what humanity does after we win. She paused. Besides, someone needs to survive to tell the story. Dead men can't spread warnings. Warlord Thane was brought to the shuttle bay. He would be released, sent down to the surface of his ruined homeworld in an escape pod. Jisoo wanted him to see what his actions had brought about. She wanted him to live with the knowledge that his victory at Sejong Station had cost his entire civilization. Before he was loaded into the pod, she spoke to him one last time. You asked why we did this. I'll tell you. Not because we're cruel. Not because we enjoy killing. But because we learned a long time ago that there are only two ways to deal with predators. You either submit to them or you make them extinct. Which did you choose? Thane asked bitterly. We chose a third option. We made you irrelevant. She gestured to the pod. Go, tell your people what happened here. Tell them that humanity gave you a choice and you chose wrong. Tell them that we tried diplomacy and you responded with massacre. Make sure they understand that this could have been avoided. And if they want revenge, if they rebuild and come for you again? Jisoo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we'll come back. And next time we won't stop with just your military. We'll make sure there's no one left to want revenge. Thane was sealed in the pod and launched toward the planet. Jisoo watched it descend through the toxic atmosphere, a small light falling toward the ruins below. Then she turned away and walked back to the bridge. Commander Young-ho, record a message. All frequencies. Maximum broadcast power. I want every species in the galaxy to hear this. When the channel was ready, she spoke clearly and calmly. This is Fleet Admiral Jisoo of the Terran Union. What you are witnessing is the result of an unprovoked attack on a human colony. 967 humans died at Sejong Station. We remember every name, every face, every dream they'll never fulfill. Let this be known across the stars. Humanity does not seek war. We prefer peace, cooperation, and mutual understanding. But if you attack our people, if you harm our civilians, if you celebrate their deaths, there will be no negotiation, no surrender, no mercy. Only mathematics. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Behind her, the view screen showed Vrellis Prime, burning and broken. The Vrellan Empire attacked one of our stations and killed 967 people. In return, we erased their homeworld and eliminated their military across 40 star systems. The ratio is clear. The price is known. Attack us and we will finish it. Not because we want to, but because we must. Because the universe is watching and weakness invites more attacks. We will not be weak. We will not be victims. We will remember our dead, and we will make sure their deaths are not repeated. She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Set course for Earth. Our work here is done. The fleet departed Vrellis Prime, leaving behind a world that would take centuries to recover. Aid ships arrived later, operated by neutral alien species who wanted to document what had happened. They found a population traumatized and broken, struggling to survive in the ruins of their civilization. They found Warlord Thane, wandering through the wreckage of what had once been the capital city, muttering about the 967. 5 years later, a memorial was built on Earth. It stood in Geneva, near the headquarters of Terran Command. 967 names were carved into black stone, along with their faces and a brief description of who they had been. Commander Deho, who had tried so hard to save his people. Dr. Hyejin, who had dreamed of peaceful contact with alien life. Lieutenant Bora, who had fought to the last. Minho, who had made sure Earth would know what happened. People came to the memorial every day. They left flowers. They touched the names. They remembered. On the frontier, humanity's colonies continued to expand. New stations were built, new worlds were settled, and none of them were ever attacked again. The galaxy had learned the lesson. Humanity was not to be trifled with. They were peaceful when given the choice, but when forced to fight, they fought with a totality that terrified everyone who witnessed it. In the ruins of the Vrellan Empire, the survivors rebuilt slowly. They were a different people now, humbled and broken. Their warrior culture died with Vrelly's prime. They became merchants and scholars instead, trading and learning rather than conquering. Sometimes their children asked about the old days, about the glories of the empire. The elders would take them to the ruins of the capital and tell them about Sejong Station, about 967 humans who just wanted to live in peace, about what happened when you attacked humanity's people. In a small outpost, on the edge of human space, Commander Jihoon sat in his office. On his desk was a plaque listing the names from Sejong Station. A young officer entered, nervous about his first frontier posting. "Sir," I wanted to ask, "the Vrelly's protocol. Would we really do it again? If someone attacked us?" Jihoon looked at the plaque, at the 967 names that had changed the galaxy. "Pray you never have to find out, Lieutenant. Pray that everyone remembers the price. Because if they forget, if they decide to test us again, then yes, we'll do it again. We'll do whatever is necessary to protect our people. That's what it means to be human." The young officer nodded slowly and left. Jihoon turned back to his work, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone was always watching. Someone was always calculating whether humanity was weak enough to attack. And every day that they chose not to, every day that passed without another Sejong Station, was a day that 967 people had not died in vain. In the end, they learned what humanity had always known. It wasn't the size of your empire that mattered. It wasn't how many ships you had or how fierce your warriors were. What mattered was what you were willing to do to protect what was yours. And humanity had shown the galaxy exactly how far they would go. The stars remained peaceful, and humanity remembered.